What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weir. I love talking about movies and I love ranking movies, and that is what we're going to do here today because we are coming down to the end of the year in 2024. And when we get to the end of the year on this channel, I start putting out all the different rank lists from the different genres of movies or lists of movies. For instance, I'll be putting out a top 10 best of the year, top 10 worst of the year, top 10 most surprising, top 10 most disappointing. I'll also be putting out a full horror ranked list of all the horror films that I had a chance to see in 2024. And in this video, we are going to talk about all of the comic book films that I had a chance to see and rank them from worst to best. Now, my list probably will not match your list. That's perfectly normal because we're all human and we all like different things. So whatever your list is, maybe you don't have as many as I have, maybe you have more, throw those in the comment section down below. Let me know how you would rank them, and just keep in mind that this is just my personal list. It's not supposed to match yours. We're supposed to like different things. With all that said, if this is the first time you're finding my channel at the end of 2024, well, you've missed a lot of content and I'd love for you to check it out. If you could hit that subscribe button, check out all the different content I have, whether it's movie reviews, Blu-ray talk, ranked list videos. I've got a little bit of everything on my channel. If you like movies, I think you'll enjoy my channel. With that said, let's rank all the comic book movies that I had a chance to see in 2024 from worst to best. Coming in at number 7, guys, the worst of the worst. This will probably not be any different than anyone else's comic book movies ranked lists. I will be surprised, but there's always going to be somebody in the comments that's like, I actually liked that. And that's fine. Like what you like. But at number 7 for me, the worst of the year is Madame Web. Madame Web, of course, bringing in Dakota Johnson as the title character of Madame Web. It is a terribly executed origin story for a superhero-ish person that we don't care about. You get Madame Web going around this film, predicting the future, and then doing a really bad job to stop things that are going to happen. On top of the poor storyline and execution of this film, they were like, you know what, we're going to introduce a bunch of Spider-Women characters, something that's been lacking from the MCU or from Sony's universe, all these Spider-Women. And I was like, you know what, I'm on board for that. One of the people playing one of the Spider-Women was Sydney Sweeney. That got me excited. I was like, all right, I'm in, I'm locked in. I'll check this out on week 1. And what a waste as well, because you don't really get the Spider-Women characters. You get the girls before they're the Spider-Women characters. And I don't know if after getting bitten by spiders, they become intelligent, but there's some really dumb things that they do throughout this film, including dancing on top of a table at a cafe. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't even know how to explain how ridiculous that scene is unless I show it to you. So if I find a clip of it, I'll post it right here. If I don't, it's just 3 girls dancing on top of a cafe table.
What is that? We have to go.
Because they needed to further the storyline and get attention on themselves. It's really bad. I already said it's got bad execution, but it is bad. And the last bad thing that I'll say about this film was the villain. The villain is maybe possibly the worst villain that I've ever seen in a comic book movie anywhere. First of all of his lines were redubbed. I don't know why they had to do that unless it was just the guy couldn't speak. And so test audiences said, hey, this needs to be fixed. And they were like, no problem. We'll just ADR his voice and we'll make this the thing. Like, that's what they ended up doing with his character. And his character's motivation was so stupid. In the beginning of the film, he wants this spider. He shoots Madame Web's mom. She somehow survives her mom getting shot because she's in her womb still and she's born. And then you've got this supernatural Spider-Verse woman that's created because of this incident. And of course, it has to end with him dying. But it has to end with advertisement as well, so he gets hit with a Pepsi sign in the head. I don't know if that's the greatest advertising that I've ever seen. I didn't walk out of the theater going, you know, after watching that guy get crushed with a Pepsi sign, it makes me want a Pepsi. Point I'm trying to make here is that Madame Web was absolutely abysmal. It's a movie that I will never watch again. I will never recommend to anyone. It is the worst comic book film of 2024. But the nice thing about talking about this movie right now is that we only have to go up from here. At number 6, guys, we have another entry into Sony's Spider-Man adjacent universe. And that, of course, is the most recent movie to release on this list, Kraven the Hunter. Now, when they cast Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven the Hunter, I actually thought that was a fun idea. He's a good actor. He could do a bit of a Russian accent because we've seen him do one with Quicksilver. And then I watched this movie and found out that they didn't want him to have the accent. And I don't know if that was because they wanted to distance himself from Quicksilver. So they gave him a storyline where he runs away from his father at the beginning of the film because his father is kind of a gangster and abusive. And so he runs away from his dad. But this is after a lion bit him, dropped lion blood into him, and then voodoo magic happens to make him an ultimate hunter. And so in this film, you get Aaron Taylor Johnson making his way back to his father on a vengeance mission, taking out all of his father's gangster friends just to try and get to his father. But while this is all going on, they're like, hey, let's introduce two more iconic Spider-Man characters. One will be the Rhino, and he'll be the most pathetic looking Rhino, and I'm including Paul Giamatti here, pathetic looking Rhino that you've ever seen on screen. And then we'll also include Chameleon in one of the dumbest after credit scenes that's not really an after credit scene that's not ever going to go anywhere ever. Look, the three Spider-Man villains that are in this film, even though they're pretending one of them is a protagonist in Kraven, the three villains that you have in this are some of my favorite Spider-Man villains. I loved Kraven the Hunter in the animated 90s Spider-Man series. He would always come to town, try to hunt down Spider-Man. He always had a one-up on Spider-Man. Spider-Man would always barely survive it. They ended up having a bit of a friendship afterwards. Like, there's a very awesome connection between Kraven and Spider-Man. And without Spider-Man in this film, it just felt hollow. And then they're like, oh, we'll just throw other Spider-Man villains in it. That'll be fine. So you get this Rhino, which is a CGI nightmare, and it's clearly tacked into the plot so they had something else to do, because otherwise he was just going around being Kraven, killing people. I truly believe they tagged Rhino into this in the last year of reshoots. And then finally we get Chameleon, who is another great Spider-Man villain, someone who can change their appearance, can be an incredibly deadly assassin because he can change his appearance like this. He also has the ability to ruin Peter Parker's life if he ever figures out his identity, because he could look like Peter Parker and start ruining lives. Like, there's so many things Chameleon can do, and in this movie he's just the brother of Kraven who eventually wants to run the evil empire. Why? Why did they do this to me? Kraven the Hunter is only better than Madam Web because it had some R-rated bloody violence. That's it. There's nothing else redeemable about Kraven the Hunter. It is yet another movie I will not go back to. Let's move on. At number 5, we have the third entry into the Sony Spider-Man adjacent universe. I'm not trying to pick on Sony. I'm wearing a Spider-Man shirt. I'm a huge fan, but when you treat these characters with such disrespect, they're gonna be at the bottom of my list. So at number 5, we have Venom: The Last Dance. I was a little skeptical when I heard it was called The Last Dance. I was like, please don't have a scene where Venom's going to be dancing, and god damn it, he's dancing. What are they doing with this franchise? You've got an excellent character like Venom. You don't want him to be anywhere near Spider-Man for whatever reason, fine. I thought the first Venom movie was decent. Some corny lines throughout, but I thought it was a fun movie. I thought part 2 was fun, even though it did a little too much. I loved the stuff between Eddie Brock and Carnage. To me, that worked. So in this film, The Last Dance, what is it going to be about? Well, it's kind of about the government trying to hold all the symbiotes and being after Eddie Brock because now he's a fugitive. And also Noel, the god of all the symbiotes, who I'm pretty sure was just thrown in at the last minute, much like Rhino in the Kraven film. You've got Noel sending his monsters to Earth to try and get what's known as the Codex. Something we've never heard about before in the Venom films, but now there's a Codex, and of course it's inside of Eddie Brock. So if he has the Venom symbiote on the outside, the monsters can spot him, and if he has Eddie Brock on the outside, well, then the soldiers can spot him. So now he's got this conundrum where he has to either show the symbiote to the monsters who could kill him, or show Eddie Brock to the soldiers who could capture him. And so throughout this film, you've got this back and forth where they're showing more of Tom Hardy because that's a better evil than having the monsters after him. So you don't get a lot of Venom. Then when you do get Venom, I don't know what happened to the CGI machine, but my God, the CGI doesn't look good at all. There's some moments. I like the venomized fish, some venomized horse. Like, there's some moments where the CGI works, but when you're getting money shots of Venom in this film, they look pretty rough. Then towards the end of this film, it's just all out chaos. They're like, hey, we're throwing everything at the fan at this point, so just bring in a bunch of symbiotes. And some of them were kind of fun, some of them were kind of dumb, and that's kind of how I felt about this movie. Kind of fun, kind of dumb. And that's why it's better than the other two Sony entries. But I'll be honest, I'm glad Tom Hardy is done with the character of Venom, moving on to bigger and better things. I hope he does well in the future, and I hope Sony lets this Venom universe die and eventually incorporates Venom with Spider-Man. That's all I'm asking. If I could ask for one thing out of the last 3 films we've talked about on this list, it's just take Spider-Man and put him with his villains. Let his villains be villains, let Spider-Man be the good guy, and let them fight. It's worked so many times in the past, and now you've got to do movies like Morbius, Venom, Madam Web, Kraven, movies that nobody cares about, nobody wants to go back to. This was a terrible movie yet again. Let's move on. For our number 4 pick, we're going to move over to the other side of the superhero genre with Joker, Folie à Deux. Now listen, I enjoy portions of this movie. I don't think this is all bad. It is definitely better than the previous 3 entries on this list. But Joker, Folie à Deux is a musical that nobody asked for. You give us the idea of giving us a follow-up to one of my favorite comic book movies. I mean that. I think Joker is a brilliant comic book film. I think Joker was a great look at how broken a man can be and what he will do when he feels desperate, when he feels trapped. And I also really love the psychotic nature of that first Joker film, where you didn't know what was real and what wasn't real, how much of it happened in Joker's head, how much of it didn't happen. You have no idea. Down to the end credits of this film, you have Joker laughing while he's talking to a therapist. They say, "What's so funny?" And he says, "You wouldn't get it." And you're thinking to yourself, okay, so is the whole thing in his head? Did Arthur Fleck make all of this up? Is he even the Joker? That's one of the beautiful things about that original Joker film. So when they announced the sequel, I was like, all right, let's see what you can do with it. And then they announced that Lady Gaga was going to be Harley Quinn. And I thought, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense, that she kind of works. And then they said it's going to be a musical. And then I was like, well, surely it's not going to be a full-time musical. Like, they'll have some musical numbers, but there's no way this will be an actual musical, right? And then you get the film, and it is musical number after musical number after musical number. Here's the thing. I think a portion of this could have worked. I think some of the stuff between Joker and Harley Quinn could have worked. They meet at a music lesson in Arkham after the events of the first Joker film. I actually thought that worked for me. I thought, okay, this makes sense why they're having the music come out, because there's a musical tie, a musical relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn. So that makes sense. But they just go overboard with the music. It's just constant. Every time it seems like a movie's going to go somewhere where it's going to be fun and dark to watch, it just jumps into a silly song and dance routine and took me out of it completely, down to the final moments. And I won't spoil what happens, but there's a moment at the end of this film where Joker is having something happen to him, and you're like, oh, that's pretty messed up. Please don't go into a song here. God damn it. Another song. And so then it just goes into another song of what's going on at the end. The point I'm trying to make here is that I think there were some good ideas in Joker. That's why I have it over the other 3 movies. I also think there's some great acting in this film from both Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga. So there's some things to enjoy about Joker, Folie à Deux. It's not all bad. I'm not calling it the worst of the year by far, but it's not the format that works for this kind of movie. And I think people showed that when the movie bombed at the box office. So Joker, Folie à Deux is number 4. I'll be honest, when I saw it, I thought it would be closer to the bottom of the list. So I guess good on DC for being better than Sony this year. We've made it to the top 3 of the comic book films of 2024, and while I have been very critical and negative of the previous entries on this list, I will say that the next 3 films we're about to talk about are movies that I enjoyed. They're movies that I'd put on the shelves back there. I had a fun time with these movies in the theater. So with that said, at number 3, we have The Crow.
I drink it every morning so I can fight like the Crow.
Now, I know that's going to be some people out there that aren't fans of this film. They really love that original Crow film, so they're not really a big fan of this, but I thought this movie did a good enough job. I thought it was a movie that I would rewatch again in the future. Bill Skarsgård plays the Crow this time around, and I love the love interest between him and Shelley in this film. And while I thought the main villain was a little hokey and supernatural, I thought it kind of fit with the supernatural theme of the entire movie. A guy gets killed, goes to the underworld, comes back to avenge the love of his life, comes back to take on the evil that sent him to the underworld in the first place. Like, there's a supernatural element to The Crow, and so the fact that the villain in this film was supernatural as well, that worked for me. There are also some incredible moments of violence in this movie, especially one in an opera house where he's going through and just taking people out. I thought those moments were fun. And on top of all of that, I thought the soundtrack to this movie was pretty kick-ass, including a song called Total Depravity by The Veils. I had never heard it before watching this this movie, and at the end of the year, my Apple playlist said that it was one of the top songs for the entire year. That's how much I enjoyed it. So this movie had a lot going for it. I could understand where people found negatives in this, maybe big fans of the original Crow film. They liked Brandon Lee better than Bill Skarsgård. I get all that. If you enjoyed that first movie better, that's fine. But for me, this movie comes in at number 3 because I was at least entertained. Coming in at number 2, guys, we have Transformers 1. Now, this is a movie I didn't see in theaters because, to me, it was one of the worst trailers of the entire year. I'm not a huge fan of animated films. There's some movies I'll make an exception for, or there's some movies I'll take my kids to. And even though Transformers is a group of films that I enjoy to watch, or I watched the cartoons when I was a kid, the trailers for this movie just didn't do it for me. Transformers 1, a movie about Optimus Prime and Megatron when they were younger and they were friends, and before they had this big feud, I was like, what are they really going to do here? I know how it's going to end. And while the movie does end in the spot you exactly know where it's going to end, getting there was such a fun time. I thought the story for this movie was really well done, and the animation was gorgeous throughout. There's even some animation where they do flashbacks where it's like this grainy animation that's on par with movies like the Spider-Verse films or the new TMNT film. I still feel that after watching it a couple months ago. I thought Transformers 1 was a really fun time. I ended up really enjoying the back and forth between Optimus Prime and Megatron throughout this film. There was enough in this movie to enjoy if you're an adult or if you're a kid. My kids were laughing at all the silly humor, and while all that silly humor didn't necessarily work for me, I thought this movie did a good job entertaining both crowds. So with that said, Transformers 1 is my number 2 pick for comic book films in 2024. Coming in at number 1, guys, and my favorite comic book movie of 2024. If you've been following along this year at all, you probably know what it is already, but it is Deadpool and Wolverine. This movie was everything I wanted it to be and everything I needed it to be. I was so excited to see this on opening day. I watched it twice on opening weekend. That's how much I enjoyed it. And yes, this movie is nostalgia bait the film. Yes, this movie is cameo fest the movie. But you know what it was? It was fan service the movie, and I loved it. I think Ryan Reynolds is a perfect Deadpool, and I think he showed us that in the previous Deadpool entries, but he showed us that even more in this movie. With as much of a hand he had in this franchise, just watching him play out the merc with a mouth, doing such a great job with it. Like, if I think Deadpool, I think Ryan Reynolds, and that is not an easy thing to do. There's been so many of our favorite heroes recast over the years, and I can't imagine seeing somebody else play Deadpool in the future. Not to mention the fact that this movie gave us Logan again. It gave us Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. Those claws came out, and him fighting Deadpool at different portions of this movie was so much fun. I thought the comedy worked on every level, and I thought the action worked on every level. That's what you need in a fun comic book movie. And in a year where we did not get very many great comic book movies, this movie stands out head and shoulders above everything else that came out in the comic book genre. And I think if you take this movie and you put it in another year where you have some stronger comic book films, this film still is at the top, or in the top couple of movies at least. I loved everything about Deadpool and Wolverine. I loved that this was a love letter send-off to the Fox universe, a universe that I grew up with as a kid. Seeing characters from those movies like Johnny Storm, like Elektra, like the original Blade, that was incredible. Seeing some new characters come on the screen too, like all the different versions of Deadpool or Channing Tatum's Gambit, those were so fun, so iconic. When I look back on 2025, I think about the superhero movies, or I think about movies in general, I have to think about Deadpool and Wolverine. And guys, that's my list of comic book movies ranked from worst to best in 2024. If you've seen these movies and you've got a ranked list, like I said at the beginning of this video, throw that in the comment section down below. I'd love to know how your list ranks up against mine. You may have liked some things better than I did, and I'd love to know why you did as well. So throw all that in the comment section and let's talk about it. With that said, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of my comic book movies from 2024, ranked from worst to best. I love making these ranked videos. They're so much fun to make. Love putting out all these end of year videos as well, so keep an eye out on my channel for all of the different playlists. And in the meantime, if you want to check out any other content on my channel, well, I've got all of my best and worst of 2024 right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.